Every week, so much happens in your own country that it's hard to keep track of the news at home, let alone around the world. So in the next 8 minutes, I'm going to walk you through some of the biggest news stories from the last 7 days, but we'll be moving fast. So if you want to find out more about any of the stories, then there'll be article recommendations in the description. This week's biggest stories include Ethiopia's election, Facebook's engineers stalking women, and Trump suing social media sites. Before we start, make sure you're subscribed and ring the bell to be notified every time we put out a new global news video. Thanks for your support. First up, let's discuss the assassination of Haiti's president, Jovenel Moise. As we explained in a video last week, which is linked below, 28 people allegedly broke into the president's house during the night, shooting 12 bullets into Moise, which unsurprisingly killed him. Most of those people have been arrested, with the majority originating from Colombia, with 2 also coming from the US. This led to speculation surrounding why these people wanted to harm the president, with the country's ambassador to the US suggesting that they were foreign mercenaries. This is a claim backed by the late president's wife, remarking on Twitter that they sent mercenaries to kill the president at home with members of his family because of roads, water, electricity, the referendum, as well as elections, so that there is no transition in the country. The country itself certainly is in turmoil, because, as we explained in the full video, there's a constitutional debate over who has the right to take over the reins. Some say it's the head of the Supreme Court who should take control, but he died of COVID last month and is yet to be replaced. Others say it's up to Parliament to choose, but they were dissolved by Moise. Either way then, choosing a successor is messy, and with competing claims for Prime Minister too, well, many are worried how the country will emerge from this, with growing fears that gang violence could increase in a scramble for power. Speaking of battles for leadership, let's move to Ethiopia, a country we discussed quite a lot on this channel, who just held a parliamentary election. This election saw the country's Prime Minister, Abiy Ahmed, win a landslide victory, with his Prosperity Party winning 410 out of the 436 contested seats of the 547-seat parliament. This is a huge win, which gives Abiy not only another 5 years in power, but also the supermajority needed to make changes to the country's constitution, something he argues is necessary to fix the country's woes. This victory is something that Abiy is likely to celebrate, but it's not all that surprising when you consider that the opposition party didn't take part in the election, following their leader's arrest on terrorist charges. In addition, despite the state-affiliated Ethiopian Human Rights Commission reporting no serious or widespread human rights violations during the voting period, their preliminary report did admit that some constituencies experienced improper arrests, voter intimidation, and harassment of observers and journalists, as well as several killings in the days leading up to the vote. So Abiy may have won in the country, at least the parts that are able to vote, but there's still a lot of work to be done before he impresses the international community. Let's now move to Europe and discuss semiconductors. As many of you will know, the world is currently experiencing a major computer chip shortage, with semiconductors being the most in demand. To try and counter this issue, Intel is looking to spend $20 billion in Europe to develop a new semiconductor factory. Europe's also keen to make this happen, with the company's chief executive recently meeting with the leaders of both Italy and France to try and hammer out an agreement which would see the EU offer generous benefits in return for the factory. Not only would such a plant help with global shortages and provide EU jobs, but it also assists with the EU's objective of doubling semiconductor production in the bloc by 2030. In an attempt to sweeten the deal yet further, Intel have even suggested building sites across multiple EU nations to help consolidate support, with potential long-term investment reaching $100 billion in Europe. The countries apparently under consideration at the moment include Germany, the Netherlands, France, and Belgium, but the final decision won't be coming until later this year. Let's stay with technology, because last week Presidents Biden and Putin had a call to discuss, among other things, ransomware attacks. Since the leaders met last month, the issue has only become more important, with one recent attack alone hitting 1,500 companies, with many accusing that the majority of attacks originate in Russia, with some reportedly even coming from the Russian state. Talking to the media about the call, Biden said that he made it clear to Putin that the United States expects that when a ransomware operation is coming from his soil, even though it's not sponsored by the state, we expect them to act if we give them enough information to act on who that is. When asked whether the US would retaliate and attack the servers being used by hackers, Biden simply responded yes. According to Putin's spokesperson, though, they've received no such requests from the US over the last month. But regardless, many are hopeful that this new approach will improve US-Russia relations and truly limit this burgeoning issue. Whether they're right and whether it will be successful, well, that's yet to be seen. Speaking of Russia, let's slide east a bit to the border between the EU state of Lithuania and Russian-allied Belarus. We've discussed Belarus in previous videos, with the country recently holding what many described as fraudulent elections, as well as grounding a Ryanair flight to get access to a government critic. Unsurprisingly then, many are looking to leave the country, with this flow of migrants largely headed towards neighbouring Lithuania, with more than 410 illegal border crossings in June alone, more than the previous 4 years combined. In response, Frontex, Europe's border force, have announced that they'll be increasing support for Lithuania, protecting the bloc's external border. These plans see Frontex more than double their number of officers on the border, as well as sending helicopters to the region, with the Border Force's executive director committing to ongoing support for the region. Speaking of changes in the EU, this month sees Slovenia take control of the rotating presidency of the Council of the EU. This is a position that rotates every 6 months, with Slovenia taking over from Portugal. Things haven't got off to a great start for them though, with MEPs attacking the country during their first week's proposals. This maybe isn't all that surprising for Slovenia though, as the country's leader has previously been jailed on corruption charges and reportedly believes that Trump won the 2020 election, while his country stands accused of violating the freedom of the press, interfering with judicial independence, and failing to cooperate with the new European Prosecutor's Office. Maybe then the presidency is already proving to be a double-edged sword. While the role offers some added power and influence for smaller states, it also puts them in focus and leads to increased scrutiny and criticism, something which the country's president is already trying to distract from. Penultimately, let's move back to the US, where former President Trump has launched a lawsuit against Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, all sites that have limited his reach since his comments on January 6th. Trump's claiming that these bans are an impingement on his First Amendment right to free speech, but many doubt that this claim will hold any water at all. The First Amendment states that Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. The key word there being Congress, not Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. As a private company protected by Section 230, there's no precedent for a case like this, and the First Amendment doesn't even really apply. Therefore, it's very unlikely that this case will be successful, especially considering recent precedents surrounding the First Amendment and Section 230. So, why is Trump pouring effort into this case? Well, the more cynical among you might suspect that he's actually just trying to fundraise and get attention. Money is always a big deal in politics, but this fight against the increasingly unpopular names of Silicon Valley could help Trump cement himself as a defender of the right and the ordinary man. Whether it's true or not might be as irrelevant as his chance of winning, because ultimately this is a battle for messaging, and one that Trump could win. Let's end with a pretty scary story about one of those defendants, Facebook. An extract of a new book on the company was published by The Telegraph this week, revealing the level of access the company's engineers used to have to personal details, disclosing the lack of safeguards protecting users, at least historically. Between January 2014 and August 2015, 52 employees were let go from the company after they exploited access to personal data, with myriad stories coming to light of things like engineers stalking their dates, or even in one case, a Facebook engineer who tracked a woman who left him while on holiday, following her to her new hotel. These revelations are certainly worrying, and there's a link to the full article in the description if you want to read more. In fact, there's links to all of the articles we've referenced below if you want some further reading. If you think we missed anything this week, then comment below the stories you'd like to see us cover in future episodes. Also, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to be notified every time we release a new video. Special thanks to our Patreon backers who make videos like this possible, and if you want to see your name at the end of videos, then you too can back us on Patreon. The link to that is in the description.